Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Gain's Interview Cruncher. I'm Shuli Ghosh. I'm delighted to be hosting this session as part of Gain's new series on climate change and nutrition, why they need each other. From plant growth to crop yields, it's clear that our food security is being challenged on multiple fronts. High temperatures, drought, flooding, they're all taking their toll. Today, we're going to be hearing from two of the world's leading scientists on how climate change threatens nutrition and food security, and try to answer some of the most pressing questions about the expected crisis. So how does climate change affect our ability to produce the food needed to feed a growing population? How does it impact on the nutritional value of food? And what does it mean for those people who are already struggling to eat a sufficient and healthy diet? We'll be drawing on the latest scientific evidence to lay out the most impactful actions we can take to respond to the changes which are coming, as well as reducing the emissions from our food systems. We've also got the COP27 climate conference coming up in November. So we'll be asking what actions and what commitments we need to see from governments around the world. What kind of solutions can be implemented? And we'll also be reflecting on Gain's work to ask what we and other actors can do to respond to the growing threat of climate change. Cynthia Rosenzweig is a senior research scientist at the NASA Goddard Institute of Space Studies. She leads the Climate Impacts Group investigating the interactions of climate on systems and sectors important to human well-being. And in 2022, she was awarded the World Food Prize for her work on climate impacts on the agricultural sector at both national and global level. Cynthia, we know that people in certain parts of the world are already struggling to get enough food and to get enough healthy, nutritious food. How does climate change impact on the ability to produce enough food to feed the world's population?
Julie, thanks for the introduction. And I've prepared a PowerPoint. So to answer the first question and then give some pointers to some of the later discussion. To answer your question about climate change and food, what's the latest? Because there's now been work for a couple of decades or more, as Mario's been working on it for 25 years at least. But what is the latest right now, in terms of what we're learning and know about climate change and food? So to start off, we turn to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, because they are the groups of scholars from all over the world who sift and winnow through all of the studies and research, and then bring forward to the policymakers of the world, as well as everyone in the world, what's the latest on climate change and food. So I'm going to start there. And Shuli, just as you said, climate change, especially including the increases in the extreme events, and in the extreme events of, it's not just they're both more frequent, but they're also more intense. These are the droughts and the heat waves. And this key point from the IPCC to start off with is that this is happening already. It's no longer in the future. This is happening now. It has already reduced food and water security. And then the IPCC links this very closely with the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And you know, the world is supposed to be achieving those by 2030. That means we only have 8 years left. So the IPCC, in the diagram on the right, what's new is that they are really bringing together not just agriculture and crop production. There were most of the decades previously, there's been work on the crops, which of course are very important, but they then bring together the animal and livestock health. And I know we're going to be, and productivity, Mario's going to be talking about that. He's a worldwide expert in that. And then bringing the fisheries in as well. So they're bringing all of the elements of food security together. What the diagram is showing very briefly is, and what I've circled in red, are, first of all, the places that we have high confidence that this is happening already. That's the dark purple. And then I've circled the place where there are increasing adverse impacts. So I know we're going to delve more deeply into Africa and Asia later, but definitely Africa is a place very much being affected already by climate change. Australasia, the small islands, very, very critical and most vulnerable places on Earth to climate change. And they've also included the high latitudes. So the indigenous populations in the high latitudes also very important. That's in the Arctic. And urban areas, urban food security is now being really brought in by the IPCC. And then Mediterranean, I think the whole world loves the Mediterranean region. And we see effects happening there already. So that's the first link from first news from IPCC. Now, that's what's happening already. Now, turning to the future, climate change will increasingly put pressure on the food production and access because, look, the projections are things are just going to basically get worse and worse and worse. And again, we see in Africa, risk to food security, risk of malnutrition. Here's the link to nutrition coming in with micronutrient deficiency, loss of livelihoods, such a key part of food security. And Asia as well, with declining coastal fisheries. The diagram on the right is a very famous IPCC diagram. It's called the burning embers diagram. And it's been done for many different systems. But this is one that was done by the IPCC Working Group 2 that came out earlier this year on food production, combining crops, fisheries, and livestock in Africa. And what this is showing is it links it to the global surface temperature and is showing the dotted line is what we've experienced so far, over 1 degree of warming already. And 1.5 is the target warming from the Paris Agreement. And when you see the yellow, which is moderate risk, change to red, change to very high, we see why the IPCC scientists have called out the 1.5 degrees C warming, which is what we need to keep the warming to avoid tremendously greater risks to food security, in this case in Africa, but throughout the world. And just one more, this is the work of the AgMIP, the Agricultural Model Intercomparison and Improvement Project, and Mario is also on the steering council for AgMIP as well. This is work from AgMIP that was brought forward in the IPCC as well. And it's that the latest climate projections are showing that not only more negative effects, but earlier negative effects. And that is why you see that yellow line emerging from the envelope of historical variability to show that climate change, basically, this is highlighting, of course, maize, a very important and ubiquitous crop throughout the world. The projections are getting worse. Now, I know we're going to be talking a lot about nutrition, and just want to give a quick recap with this slide, which is the combined effects of climate change and high carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Here on the left is current. When just what we were just talking about, climate change is projected, the red is the decrease in the production of crops, the yields. But when you bring in the CO2 fertilization and climate change, it helps on the crop productivity. But work has shown that it affects the micronutrients, the quality of the crop. So this is this linkage is one of the key linkages, that climate change alone decreases calories. CO2 effects restore calories, but decreases the nutrient quality of the crops. So this is one of the key linkages. I won't go into this whole box and arrow diagram, but where we're in this situation now is that we can't only think about climate change. So Chris Ebi and others from and others from the World Adaptation Science Program, which is all the UN agencies working on climate change and these challenges, did a paper in which we compared and brought together climate change and the COVID-19 crisis. So when we think about health and the supply chain issues and thinking about food security, this is the effects of COVID, potential future pandemics, right? And then we added into the slide conflict because of the really significant effects that are in the news every day on the grain supplies from the Ukraine region that feeds so much of the world. It is absolutely one of the world's breadbaskets. And then, but also don't forget the fertilizer effects as well. The prices have gone up 30 to 40% already, and that's having effects for the global fertilizer prices and supplies, affecting right here in the United States, but many places as well. But this is showing how we have to think about the development pathways. Remember, we talked about sustainable development. We've got to keep that in mind and figure all of these three crises out together. Very challenging, but we've got to do it. This is my last slide, which will be, I hope, also launching into our discussion. This is the project that we want to do. AgMIF with Mario and GAIN would like to do, to work together to bring representative dietary pathways into the work that we do, which is projecting how climate change will affect food. So we have to create with multi-model approach, which is much more rigorous than anything that's been done before, food and nutrition security metrics toolbox. So with that, please, if you are interested, please join AgMIF. Please check out the website. Thank you very much.
Cynthia, thank you so much for that. And we always talk a lot about the impact of climate change, but when you see it all put together like that, it's extremely eye-opening, isn't it? Thank you. And I know that we're going to delve a little deeper into some of those things that you've brought up there. If you want to find out more about the work that GAIN is doing, latest news and events and a replay of this, then just go to the website, gainhealth.org. And you can also follow us on Twitter. We're at GAIN Alliance. Thank you very much. And I hope you join us again next time.